Let me fill you in on something that happened just yesterday that should terrify anyone paying attention to global power dynamics. On January 24th, 2026, the Chinese Communist Party announced it was placing General Zheng Yuxia under investigation for corruption. Now, if that name doesn't ring any bells, here's why it should. Zheng wasn't just any general, he was Xi Jinping's closest confidant, his oldest friend, and the highest-ranking military officer in China besides Xi himself. According to the Prince reporting from Saturday, Zheng served as the first vice-chairman of the Central Military Commission, making him the third most powerful figure in China's entire military apparatus. And now, he's gone. When a dictator starts purging his best friends, that's not strength, that's fear. And what we're witnessing might be the beginning of Xi Jinping's downfall. Here's the situation. For the past 13 years, Xi Jinping has built a reputation as China's strongest leader since Mao Zedong. He abolished presidential term limits in 2018, essentially declaring himself president for life. He crushed dissent, imprisoned millions of Uyghurs, and turned China into a surveillance state that would make Orwell's nightmares look quaint. The Western media dubbed him the eternal core of the party, a strongman who had consolidated more power than any Chinese leader in modern history. But power built on fear has a fatal flaw. It's brittle. And right now, watching Xi Jinping's actions from October 2025 through January 2026, we're seeing that brittle foundation develop cracks that are spreading faster than Beijing can hide them. The real story isn't whether Xi is losing power, it's whether he can survive the next 18 months without being forced out by the very system he thought he controlled. The trigger event that exposed Xi's vulnerability came in October 2025, and it was stunning in its scope. According to the Christian Science Monitor's October 27th reporting, the fourth plenum of the Communist Party's Central Committee expelled 14 members and alternates from its ranks, the largest purge at any such meeting since 2017. Nearly 1 in 6 officials who had been named to the committee when its term began in 2022 were simply absent from the plenum. That's the lowest attendance at a Central Committee meeting since the late 1970s, right after Mao's death, when China was in complete political chaos. But it gets worse. Among those 14 expelled members were 9 generals, including General He Weidong, who had been a member of the 24-person Politburo and the number 2 official on the Central Military Commission. Let me be clear about what that means. He Weidong was the first vice-chairman of the CMC to be purged in decades, not since Marshal He Long was removed at the start of Mao's Cultural Revolution in 1967. According to Al Jazeera's October 18th coverage, he hadn't been seen in public since March 2025, and Chinese authorities had never even disclosed that he was under investigation until they announced his formal expulsion. 6 months. 6 months of this man simply vanishing from public view while Xi tried to figure out what to do about him. Now here's where it gets interesting. These weren't Xi's enemies being purged. These were his hand-picked appointees. Bloomberg's analysis from August 2025 showed that Xi had already ousted nearly 1/5 of the generals he personally appointed since taking power in 2012. Admiral Miao Hua, who ran the military's political work department and controlled ideological training across the entire armed forces, was expelled after being investigated since November 2024. General He Hongjun, Miao's deputy, was also removed. General Lin Xiangyang, commander of the Eastern Theater Command, the very force that would lead any military action against Taiwan, was sacked. General Wang Xiubin, who ran the Central Military Commission's Joint Operations Command Center, was dismissed. According to the World Socialist website's October 25th analysis, every single one of these men had been described in official Chinese media as Xi's loyalists, his trusted protégés, the people he had personally elevated to the highest levels of military command. So why are they being purged now? Because they're corrupt? Or because Xi can no longer trust anyone, not even the men he appointed himself? The pattern is unmistakable, and it's been building for years. Let's trace this back. In 2023, Xi launched what he called an anti-corruption campaign targeting the PLA rocket force, the branch responsible for China's nuclear missiles. That purge swept through the Equipment Development Department and the military-industrial complex, removing dozens of senior officers connected to what Beijing called the Shanxi Gang, generals with ties to Xi's home province. Then, in 2024, the purges expanded to the Fujian clique, officers connected to Xi from his time as a party official in Fujian province in the late 1990s. These were men who had known Xi for decades, who had risen through the ranks alongside him, who owed their careers to his patronage, and one by one, Xi removed them. By the time we reached October 2025, the Central Military Commission, the body that controls China's entire 2 million strong armed forces, had only 4 of its 7 seats filled. 3 positions were simply vacant because Xi had purged the people who held them and hadn't appointed replacements. Now, yesterday, we learned that Zhang Yuxia, the last of Xi's original appointees, is under investigation too. Here's the kicker. This isn't happening in isolation. While Xi has been dismantling his own military leadership, he's also facing the worst economic crisis China has experienced in decades. According to Foreign Policy's January 6, 2025 analysis, China's real estate sector, which once accounted for nearly 30% of the country's GDP, has been in freefall since 2021. Home prices have dropped 20% nationwide. Major developers like Evergrande and Country Garden have defaulted on hundreds of billions of dollars in debt. Millions of Chinese citizens paid in advance for apartments that were never completed, and now they're refusing to pay their mortgages on properties that don't exist. The Atlantic Council's December 17, 2024 reporting noted that Beijing has blamed the developers, but the real culprit is government policy. Xi's administration actively prevented property companies from raising capital, imposed crushing regulations, and threatened their very existence because Xi believed they were too focused on profit and not sensitive enough to Communist Party ideology. The result? Private investment in China collapsed. Business owners stopped committing funds to expansion. The economy entered what economists call a deflationary spiral, where weak demand leads to falling prices, which causes consumers to delay purchases, expecting even lower prices, which further weakens demand. China has now experienced 6 consecutive quarters of deflation. That hasn't happened since the Cultural Revolution. Youth unemployment tells an even grimmer story. According to the Atlantic Council's September 18, 2025 report, over 80 million Chinese people are trapped in the gig economy with no job security and disappearing opportunities. Many young Chinese have lost hope of a better life, especially for their children. The official unemployment figures are bad enough, but everyone knows they're artificially low. Beijing actually stopped publishing youth unemployment data in mid-2023 when the numbers became too embarrassing to acknowledge. When your economy is collapsing and your military leadership is in chaos, that's when dictators become dangerous. Because they can't admit weakness, they can't acknowledge mistakes, all they can do is blame someone else and try to consolidate what power they have left. And that's exactly what we're seeing with Xi Jinping. Let me break down why this pattern is so revealing. First, consider the Shanxi purges that went after Xi's home province power base. Vision Times reported on December 4, 2025, that the crackdown centered on Xi'an, the capital of Shanxi province, which holds deep personal significance for Xi. It's where his father, Xi Zhongxun, was born, and where Xi himself lived during his youth. Feng Hongwei, the party secretary of Xi'an, was detained by investigators while visiting a temple. Yue Huafeng, chairman of the city's political advisory body, vanished without explanation. Most significantly, during questioning, a former senior figure named Yao Lijun reportedly provided investigators with financial records implicating Xi Jinping, Xi Jinping's younger brother, in corruption schemes involving cultural tourism projects. Think about that. Investigators were willing to go after the president's own brother. That doesn't happen unless someone higher up is protecting them, unless there are factions within the Communist Party that have decided Xi has become a liability. Second, look at Xi's public behavior over the past year. The Conversation's December 3, 2025 analysis noted that for the first time since coming to power in 2012, Xi skipped the annual BRICS summit. Instead, Premier Li Qiang led the Chinese delegation to Rio de Janeiro. In September 2023, Li had represented Xi at the G20 summit in New Delhi. He's taken part in ASEAN summits. But the BRICS appearance, combined with Li's increasingly prominent role in economic policymaking, suggests that Xi's influence is declining while Li's is rising. Vision Times reported on October 16, 2025, that US-based China analyst Gordon Chang discussed a scheduled meeting between Xi and Donald Trump during the APEC summit in South Korea that was abruptly canceled. According to Fox News coverage at the time, the U.S. ambassador to China stated the meeting wouldn't take place until at least 2026. Political commentator Tang Jingyuan called this cancellation highly unusual, noting that only 4 days after Trump confirmed his participation, the meeting was postponed. Chang speculated that Xi might have lost the freedom to travel abroad, or even feared being unable to return to China if he left the country. Third, consider the military's own messaging. The Diplomat's November 15, 2025 analysis highlighted something remarkable. PLA Daily, the official newspaper of the military, has been publishing articles championing the virtues of collective leadership. In Xi's China, where every word matters and nothing is published without approval, these articles represented a direct challenge to Xi's insistence since 2012 that all decisions should rely on a single voice of authority. Even more telling, Zhang Yuxia himself gave speeches to PLA soldiers emphasizing obedience to party directives and loyalty to the Communist Party, but he notably failed to equate the party's will with Xi's personal authority. That's not an accident. That's a message. And the message is clear. Xi's grip on the military is slipping. Now here's the catch-22 Xi faces, and it's truly impossible. If he keeps purging military leaders, he destroys the very command structure he needs to maintain control. Bloomberg's October 24, 2025 reporting explained that state media accused the purged generals of severely undermining the Communist Party's highest echelons of authority and challenging the system where the CMC chairman bears ultimate responsibility, referring to Xi. But by removing these men, Xi has created a military leadership vacuum. The Central Military Commission is barely functional. The officers who remain are terrified of making decisions because they've watched their predecessors get arrested for corruption, real or imagined. Military readiness is suffering. James Char, a Singapore-based assistant professor at Nanyang Technological University who researches China's military, told Bloomberg in August 2025 that there's no doubt there's a lot of turbulence in the upper echelons right now. That's an understatement. China's military leadership is in chaos. But if Xi stops the purges and tries to rebuild trust with the officers who remain, he runs the risk that those officers will turn on him, especially if they believe he's weak or losing control. It's a classic dictator's dilemma, the same trap that has destroyed authoritarian rulers throughout history. Stalin faced it. Mao faced it, and now Xi is facing it. The fracturing within China's political elite has become impossible to hide. The Lowy Institute noted in recent analysis that while skepticism about Xi's invincibility is warranted, similar rumors of his downfall have surfaced repeatedly over his 13-year rule and proven false each time. But this time feels different. Vision Times reported on October 23, 2025, that multiple unverified reports suggest Xi is now under restricted movement and close internal surveillance. In the party's history, such a situation has only ever meant one thing: a ruler who has lost the army's loyalty and the party's trust. Analysts note that when the Communist Party's vast stability maintenance apparatus begins guarding against its own leader, the system has entered self-defense mode. Recent economic rectification drives in Shenzhen targeted powerful conglomerates such as Vanke, Metro Group, and Yuanwei Holdings, widely interpreted as political surgery, targeting the Xi family's financial networks. In Communist Party politics, money and power are inseparable. Whoever can sever Xi's financial networks can effectively control his future. The legal challenge to Xi's authority hasn't come from courts because China doesn't have an independent judiciary. Instead, it's come from the party's own disciplinary mechanisms being turned against him. Jamestown Foundation's analysis from July 22, 2025 detailed four main groups now challenging Xi. First, retired Politburo Standing Committee members and party elders who have expressed disapproval of Xi's handling of economic issues and relations with the United States since the third plenum last July. Xi has imposed heavy restrictions on their activities since taking office, changing their secretaries and drivers, disallowing meetings without his approval. Second, fellow princelings, the descendants of revolutionary leaders who grew rich through political connections and who now cooperate with foreign intelligence agencies, providing what some call compromat against Xi. Third, senior military officers who have watched Xi purge their colleagues and who increasingly respond to Zhang Yuxia rather than Xi himself. Fourth, segments of China's middle class facing unemployment, bankruptcies, and the collapse of their real estate investments. Expert validation of Xi's weakness comes from voices Xi can't easily dismiss. Dr. Guo Guangwu, writing for the China Leadership Monitor on November 30, 2025, explained what he calls the dictator's dilemma toward the 21st Party Congress. Xi will certainly seek a fourth term when the Congress convenes in late 2027, but he faces acute challenges in managing the upper-tier elite precisely because he has consolidated so much power. The preparation process for selecting delegates and candidates for the new Central Committee will constitute the internal rhythm of Communist Party politics for the next 2 years, shaping subnational leadership reshuffling, factional competition, anti-corruption campaigns, and even stock market performance. Wu's analysis makes clear that Xi will personally supervise and control the entire process, but doing so will only intensify the dictator's dilemma. The tighter Xi grips power, the more threatened his subordinates feel, and the more likely they are to conspire against him. Unless Xi changes his approach to ensure elite support and discourage internal debate, his power will become brittle, and the likelihood of a succession crisis will increase dramatically. The political implications for Xi are straightforward and devastating. He has systematically eliminated the very power structures that could have supported him during a crisis. The party elders who might have defended him are under house arrest. The military officers who might have protected him are either purged or terrified into paralysis. The business community that could have stabilized the economy has been crushed by ideology-driven policies. Xi's response to these challenges has been to double down on centralization and control, which only accelerates the cycle of fear and mistrust. The fourth plenary session that met in October 2025 passed a communiqué calling on the whole party, the entire military, and Chinese people of all ethnic groups to rally more closely around the party central committee with Comrade Xi Jinping at its core. But words on paper don't create loyalty when the economy is collapsing and your closest allies are being arrested. They create resentment. The institutional damage Xi has inflicted on China's governance system will take decades to repair, regardless of who eventually replaces him. Tyler Jost and Dan Mattingly, writing for Foreign Affairs on November 4, 2025, noted that Xi faces far more acute challenges in handing over power than any previous Chinese leader precisely because of how successfully he consolidated control. During Hu Jintao's tenure from 2002 to 2012, there was a period of collective leadership with power balanced among elites. Xi destroyed that system. He didn't just centralize authority, he personalized it. Every major decision now requires his approval. Every policy initiative bears his name. Xi Jinping thought is mandatory study for all party members. That works fine when things are going well. But when the economy is failing, the military is in chaos, and rivals are circling, personalized power becomes personalized blame. There's nowhere to hide, no one else to fault. And the Communist Party has shown throughout its history that when a leader becomes a liability, the party will remove him to save itself. It happened to Zhao Ziyang after Tiananmen in 1989. It happened to other leaders who fell out of favor. The difference is that Xi has no succession plan, no designated heir, and no clear path for transferring power. His survival strategy has been to make himself indispensable. But that strategy only works until it doesn't. The electoral impact, or rather the lack of elections in China, makes this crisis even more dangerous. In democracies, failed leaders lose elections and power transfers peacefully. In authoritarian systems like China's, power transfers violently or through palace coups. Vision Times, December 4, 2025. Analysis drew parallels to ancient Chinese dynasties, noting that the Qin dynasty fell within 2 generations and the Sui collapsed after 3 years of neglecting its people. The article warned that today's Communist Party is racing down that same path, with the problem no longer being who rules, but whether the regime still has any moral right to exist. When a dictatorship loses legitimacy, when it can no longer deliver prosperity, when citizens see their savings evaporate and their futures disappear, the question becomes not whether the regime will fall, but when and how violently. Xi's China dream of national rejuvenation has turned into an economic nightmare for millions of ordinary Chinese. His anti-corruption campaigns have become weapons of political warfare. His strongman image has revealed itself as paranoia and fear. The next few weeks are crucial. The 21st National Party Congress is scheduled for late 2027, just 18 months away. Between now and then, Xi must prepare for that Congress while managing an economic crisis, rebuilding a decimated military leadership, and watching for challenges from within his own party. The spring of 2026 will see the formation of the Leadership Group for Cadre Assessments, with Xi as its head, which will review and approve the document stipulating principles for selecting delegates. That's when the factional warfare will intensify. Early summer will bring provincial party committee reshuffling, when candidates for the new central committee will start emerging. Every appointment will be scrutinized. Every promotion will be questioned, and through it all, Xi will be looking over his shoulder, wondering which of his remaining allies might be next to fall or worse, which of them might decide to move against him first. What we're witnessing isn't just the potential downfall of one dictator. It's the exposure of how fragile authoritarian control actually is. For years, Western observers marveled at China's efficiency, at Xi's ability to enforce his will, at the Communist Party's apparent stability. But that stability was always an illusion, built on economic growth that has now stopped, on military loyalty that is evaporating, and on fear that is turning into desperate self-preservation. The stakes have never been higher, not just for Xi Jinping personally, but for China and the entire world. A wounded dictator is dangerous. A dictator who feels cornered is exponentially more so. The question isn't whether Xi will try something desperate to shore up his position. The question is what form that desperation will take. Will he launch an economic stimulus so massive it bankrupts the country? Will he purge even more military leaders, risking complete command collapse? Will he pick a fight with Taiwan or another neighbor to rally nationalist support? Or will he be removed by his own party before he can do any of those things? We don't know the answer yet. But watching Xi Jinping's face during recent public appearances, watching how he's purged his oldest friend, Zhang Yuxia, watching how the cracks in his power structure spread wider every day, one thing is absolutely clear. The man who declared himself China's president for life is terrified that his time is running out, and history suggests he's right to be afraid.